Next item on the agenda is to open the meeting for public comment, and I understand we have a spokesman that is going to speak for this group, Dr. Amy Cerato. Amy? And by the way, I guess that's a Rose Rock?
It's a Rose Rock, yes.
You know, there was a gentleman that I knew very well in Lawton that his huge Rose Rock is in the museum there in Lawton. It's probably 3 feet high and that big around. It's incredible.
They're a natural wonder.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Amy Cerato, and I'm a professional civil engineer. I have my own company, Cerato Geotechnical Engineering, and I work mainly with foundations and road sightings. I also live directly in the path of the proposed southern route through Norman. I have a simple question for the board. Why these routes? Norman, Oklahoma does not want either the southern route or the east-west route. We told the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, and the OTA Authority this in 1999, and we said it again with another unanimous citywide resolution this week. We do not want these turnpikes through our city. While Governor Stitt was campaigning in 2019, he expressed opposition to the idea of building a bypass around a city where widespread opposition existed. He was actually quoted in saying, that is one of the reasons the governor has to have authority to run the Department of Transportation. You can't have these unelected people making decisions that are contrary to the will of the people. I'm here today to tell you that these proposed turnpikes through Norman are contrary to the will of the people. As you are appointed by the governor to this OTA board, I'm asking you to uphold his election promise that you will not allow turnpikes to bypass or bisect our city, a city that doesn't want or need these turnpikes. So let's talk about the engineering and why these routes. There are no sound engineering justifications for these proposed routes. These routes have been touted to remove truck traffic off of I-35 through Norman and OKC and help Norman citizens on their commute to Oklahoma City. But Norman citizens would not use these turnpikes to get to OKC. It's too far east. Trucks coming from Dallas to Tulsa would also not utilize this tollway through Norman because it adds time and miles to their route. The traffic growth projections in and around Norman were wrong in the 90s, and they are wrong now. For your information, on average, historical OTA toll revenues have been less than 63% of projections. Most recently, engineers projected that the Kickapoo project would see 12,000 vehicles per day, but in 2021, according to data on your website, it only saw 2,100 vehicles per day. There are no sound engineering justifications for these proposed routes. These proposed routes also make no engineering sense. The route profiles burn right through miles of lowlands and wetlands and significant elevation changes that I plotted from I-40 to I-35. There's 120 feet of elevation difference in a half-mile to a mile section multiple times through this route. Why would we pick this route? There are better civil engineering routes, less impactful to humans, the environment, and the geology than this route that was chosen right here. You're going to have lengthy, expensive, and unsightly elevated bridge decks, which will be much more than $25 million per mile. Splitting the city of Norman both east and west and north and south decimates long-range water, land use, and transportation planning. These proposed routes make no engineering sense. They make no economic sense either. At the current traffic counts and current average toll revenue per vehicle per day, cited by your engineers used to justify the need for these 47 miles of new turnpikes through Norman, it would take 180 years to pay back the bondholders. You are beholden to the bondholders. Do we really expect we'll be dealing with the same transportation issues in 180 years? I promise you there are less expensive options and routes right now that serve the same purpose by bypassing Norman and I-35 for eastbound travelers. The proposed routes make no environmental sense. They cut through the heart of the Lake Thunderbird watershed. They cross multiple streams. So we've got the southern route and the east-west route. They go right through the heart in many places in that watershed. There's lots of room over here outside the watershed. These routes make no environmental sense. It traverses the Garber-Wellington aquifer and encounters a multitude of stream crossings. The turnpike routes would poison our drinking water forever. Del City, Midwest City, and Norman depend on that drinking water. And East Norman depends on the Garber-Wellington for our drinking water out of our private wells. The proposed route crosses many miles of wetlands, a dozen or so major streams, and 2 wildlife management areas on Bureau reclamation lands, and yet environmental studies have not yet been done. And we have been told that we don't know when those environmental studies will be done. Meanwhile, your project management firm has hired engineering design firms, given them 5-mile sections along the route, and said to have 30% of their design work on the roadway done by October of 2022. How can they possibly do design work without having an environmental impact on these roadways? Your project management firm also authorized aerial topography to be flown this past Saturday, and they chose to fly the routes that don't make any engineering, environmental, or economic sense. No one is listening to what we're saying. And while I am a citizen, I'm also a professional civil engineer, and I'm telling you that these routes do not make any engineering, economic, or environmental sense. These proposed routes are also geologically destructive. They would destroy the only vein of barite rose rocks that exist in the world. Barite roses, commonly known as rose rocks, are distinctly Oklahoma. Our state rock since 1967. These exquisite natural wonders are found only here, between Lake Stanley, Draper, and Noble, right where you've drawn the path. You move it several miles one way or the other, you would miss this geologic formation. The National Geoheritage Area, full of geological barite rose rocks formations, we have to save them for generations to come. And my kids picked up some rose rocks for you, and I have them. I'll give them to you after my speech. I've got them right from our backyard, so you can take them home and think about, how special these are to Oklahomans, and that we need to preserve them. Let's talk about human impact. These routes impact 5 times more families than any other turnpike that the OTA has ever built in Oklahoma history. Norman is shown in the red, the Kilpatrick is over here. We're at almost 16 homes per mile. This is literally the most destructive route you could have chosen through the city of Norman. The routes may displace over 600 families in a real estate market that doesn't support the relocation to a comparable home within the city limits. There are only 75 homes for sale in Norman right now. This life-disrupting turnpike proposal threatens hundreds of families almost immediately after they survived a traumatic 2-year pandemic where families' houses truly served as their safe haven from the world. Does the OTA have a threshold? Do you have a threshold for homes and citizens displaced beyond which the OTA would no longer find this project feasible? Your spokesperson told the news that the OTA was incapable of providing the number of homes this route would take because it does not serve what we are doing to go in there and count possibly impacted homes. Yet the OTA put out a request for proposal that's in your agenda right now today to find right-of-way acquisition firms to start contacting the homeowners along these routes. I find it abhorrent from a civil engineering perspective and a human perspective that human impact would not even be considered in planning proposed turnpike routes. We all have families. How would you feel if a turnpike planned to go through your home without thinking about how many homes it would take along that route? So these proposed routes are clearly not being managed well, from an engineering and ethical perspective to a financial perspective. Why would OTA run the risk of having to pay an additional $60 million to re-engineer the routes if the environmental assessment reports could potentially come back with significant impacts? Or are the environmental assessments on OTA projects simply rubber stamped? Civil engineering engineers don't typically start paying engineering design firms to design a preliminary route prior to understanding the environmental impacts or engineering challenges to be faced. Civil engineers ethically should not reverse engineer to make a premeditated project viable. And so you know, civil engineers don't ethically change the name of projects to skirt around newly passed legislation like State Bill 1610 that requires OTA accountability. What's the rush on this project? Why are we flying routes on a Saturday? Why are we trying to push this so fast? I'm asking the OTA board to slow down and conduct the engineering studies in the correct order using sound ethical engineering practices. So to recap, there are no sound engineering justifications for these proposed routes. The proposed routes make no engineering sense. They make no economic sense. They make no environmental sense. The proposed routes are geologically destructive. The proposed routes are a disaster in terms of human impacts. This project is clearly not being managed or communicated well to the public. The citizens of Norman do not want these projects. They are poorly sited, poorly planned and communicated, and have underestimated cost projections for the type of engineering and construction that will be required. There are better routes already in existence, and if you're interested, I have 6-foot rolls of map that I'll show you 4 alternative routes that would take 300% less homes and be out of the watershed and still maintain the OTA's goal of creating an outer loop. There are better routes already in existence. The OTA is suggesting a bad solution to an overstated traffic problem in a city that doesn't want to divide its citizens not once, but twice with 2 routes. I implore you, as a professional civil engineer, as a citizen of Oklahoma, and as a mom of 3 little girls, I am asking you to put the brakes on this project. I'm asking you as a civil engineer to make sure you're following the right protocols. I'm asking you to be fiscally responsible. I'm asking you to be good stewards of the land. The citizens of Norman do not want these turnpikes. So I ask you, on behalf of the citizens of Oklahoma, and especially those families directly affected, why these routes? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy. You know, certainly you've put a lot of time and effort into what you've done here, and we appreciate it very much and appreciate your comments. And certainly, I think the Turnpike Authority takes all of these things into consideration when we look at routes. So thank you very much.